Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Anyone who has ever dreamed of going to Hogwarts has imagined the moment an owl delivers a letter, followed by the sorting ceremony, new friends, and real magic. However, if you look a bit closer, this seemingly well-thought-out system starts to show some oddities and inconsistencies. Today, let's talk about the strange and illogical aspects of the Hogwarts house system. Enjoy the video. Number 1. House size. Even with the most generous estimates, there are no more than 800 and 900 students at Hogwarts, and yet this is supposed to be the only wizarding school in Britain. Is that really enough graduates to staff the Ministry of Magic, St. Mungo's Hospital, and all the other magical institutions? It seems Harry happened to enroll in an especially quiet year. There are only 5 boys in his Gryffindor year. Either the others are never mentioned, or that really is all there is. And if there are so few students overall, the question remains, where are all the other witches and wizards? Number 2, forbidden to enter other house common rooms. Even if the idea of dividing students into houses makes some sense, the ban on entering another house's common room is rather questionable. Students have to meet in hallways just to chat. This is especially hard for siblings who were sorted into different houses. Most students don't even know where the other house's common rooms are. Instead of encouraging friendship, Hogwarts promotes total isolation. And while the rivalry between Gryffindor and Slytherin might be justified, why should Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff be separated? Number 3, teachers can't enter common rooms. Surprisingly, even teachers can't simply walk into a house common room. Like the students, they must know the password or solve a riddle. Now imagine an emergency. Say a Ravenclaw student falls ill. The teacher rushes to help and can't get in. For a school as dangerous as Hogwarts, this is not just odd. It's a serious safety issue. Teachers should have universal access to all parts of the castle. But at Hogwarts, common sense seems to come and go at will. Number 4. No bathrooms? Throughout the entire series, there's not a single mention of bathrooms in the house common rooms. We know about the prefect's bathroom and the abandoned girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor. But where do students go at night? If they're not allowed to leave their common room after curfew, and there are no facilities inside, what are they supposed to do? Sneak out and risk detention? And if they're caught, how do they prove they just needed the loo? For a magical school, you'd expect some basic logistics to be better thought out. Number 5. Quidditch team selection. Each house has its own Quidditch team, but the selection process raises questions. Harry was accepted without trials, simply because McGonagall recommended him. And then for years, the team's lineup stayed unchanged. Only after Wood graduated did they start holding tryouts. Why didn't anyone try out in the 2 years prior? Why didn't players have to prove their skill each season? It seems the whole system is based on favoritism or personal connections. It feels less like a sports team and more like a school mafia. Number 6. Common rooms ignore curfew. Hogwarts has a strict curfew. Step outside at night, and Filch is lurking, eager to hang you by your ankles. But somehow this rule doesn't apply to the house common rooms. There, students party all night, play games, and celebrate loudly. Only once did McGonagall ask them to keep it down, Betty Dawes, but no punishment followed. So apparently you can be as noisy as you like, as long as you don't leave the room. Number 7. Siblings end up in the same house. Though there are exceptions like Sirius Black or the Patel sisters, most family members end up in the same house. That sounds cozy and comforting, especially for an 11-year-old far from home. But it clashes with the Sorting Hat's main purpose, placing students based on their individual traits. For example, Charlie Weasley could have been a perfect fit for Hufflepuff, and the ambitious Percy might have felt more at home in Slytherin. The system starts to look more like a family tradition than an actual personality assessment. Number 8. House tables separate students unnecessarily. In the Great Hall, the lines are drawn with wood and tradition. 4 long tables, 4 houses, four corners of identity. When Harry first arrived, he sat with Gryffindors. And for 7 years, that never changed. Not once did he eat breakfast next to Luna Lovegood. Not once did he sit beside Cedric Diggory. It's never said outright, but it's clear. You don't sit at another house's table, not unless you want every head to turn. The setup builds invisible walls. You can laugh across the room, wave at a friend, maybe pass a note. But you don't share a meal, not with someone from the wrong colours. It's a quiet rule that speaks loudly. Even during times of crisis, the students stay in their lanes. After Cedric's death, Harry doesn't grieve with Hufflepuffs. After Luna is kidnapped, her friends in Ravenclaw mourn away from the other houses. There's no place to come together, no round table, no shared space to talk, comfort, understand. The house tables aren't just furniture, they're barriers. Hogwarts teaches students that unity matters until it's time to sit down and eat. Number 9. Open bias against Slytherin. The Great Hall was draped in green and silver. Slytherin had won the House Cup. They'd earned it, through exams, through Quidditch, through points tallied across an entire school year. Then Dumbledore stood up. With a smile, he began handing out last-minute points to Gryffindor. 50 for Harry, 50 for Ron, 50 for Hermione, and 10 for Neville. To his surprise and to ours, Dumbledore said, he stood up to his friends. The hall exploded in cheers, except at the Slytherin table, where silence sat like stone. Their banner disappeared, the colours changed, the cup, already won, was taken right in front of them. Imagine being a Slytherin that night. You studied, you trained, you followed rules, or bent them just like everyone else, but none of it mattered, not when the headmaster clearly favoured another house. The sorting hat said each house has its own noble history. But the teachers didn't act like it. Snape was the only one who stood up for his students, and he was painted as the villain. What choice did Slytherins have but to stick together, defend themselves, and push back against a system that never seemed to cheer for them? Maybe they weren't the bad guys. Maybe they were just tired of losing to a rigged game. Number 10. No way to switch houses if needed. The sorting hat makes its decision when a child is 11. One conversation, one moment, one label for life. But what if the hat was wrong? What if the student changes? No second chance, no appeal, no transfer process. Luna Lovegood, for example, ended up in Ravenclaw. She was dreamy, kind, and deeply loyal, traits that fit Hufflepuff more than a house built on sharp minds and logic. But she never had a choice. The hat said Ravenclaw, and so that was that. Students can feel trapped. Imagine a first year sorted into Slytherin who starts to question the house's values, or a Gryffindor who realizes they crave quiet, not glory. At Hogwarts, there's no process to say, I've grown, I belong somewhere else. Hermione once said, books and cleverness, there are more important things, friendship and bravery. And yet, the sorting system ignores exactly that kind of growth. It doesn't care if your heart changes or your mind opens. It only cares about who you were at 11. No other school treats identity like a permanent sentence. Even Muggle schools allow students to change classes, switch programs, find their path. But at Hogwarts, you're a Ravenclaw, or a Hufflepuff, or a Slytherin, or a Gryffindor, forever. The house colours you wear become a second skin, and if they no longer reflect who you are, too bad. The system has no place for second thoughts. Number 11. House prefect selection feels arbitrary. When the prefect badges were handed out in Harry's 5th year, everyone expected Hermione to get one, and she did. Of course I knew it would be you, Ron told her. She had been the top student since first year, always prepared, always responsible. But then came the surprise. The other badge went not to Harry, but to Ron himself. Harry was stunned. Me? Ron asked, staring at the badge like it might explode. Even Mrs. Weasley was so excited she bought him a new set of dress robes. Harry, on the other hand, had saved the Philosopher's Stone, fought a basilisk, faced off with Dementors, competed in the Triwizard Tournament. In terms of bravery and leadership, no student had done more. So why Ron? Dumbledore later explained it simply. I thought you had enough responsibility. That's it. No mention of criteria, no suggestion of academic performance or peer respect. Just a feeling, a personal decision. It wasn't about rules, it was about image. Maybe Ron needed a confidence boost, maybe Harry needed humbling, but why wrap it in the form of a formal title? Prefects are meant to enforce rules, guide younger students, represent their house. How is that decided behind closed doors? There's no vote, no explanation. Students are just told, you are, or you're not. And even they don't know why. The system sends mixed messages. Do grades matter? Then why Ron? Do deeds matter? Then why not Harry? Do personalities matter? Then why pick Percy Weasley, the most uptight rule follower in school? Whatever the criteria are, they're invisible to the students. What could have been an opportunity for merit and recognition becomes a mystery, controlled by people who never have to explain their choices. And the message is clear. Power isn't earned, it's granted. Number 12. Houses ignore personal growth. When Neville Longbottom was sorted into Gryffindor, even he seemed surprised. He didn't look brave, he wasn't loud, he wasn't confident. He lost his toad, forgot his passwords, and trembled at the sight of Snape. There's been a mistake, he muttered more than once. If bravery was the core trait of a Gryffindor, Neville didn't show it. Yet. At 11, he looked like a perfect fit for Hufflepuff. Loyal, kind, timid. But the Sorting Hat didn't see who he was. It saw who he might become. And that's the problem. What if Neville had never changed? What if life at Gryffindor had broken him instead of helping him grow? What if the sword of Gryffindor had never appeared in his hand? The system assumes every child will evolve the way the hat predicts. But not all children follow the path laid out at age 11. Some become more timid, others more rebellious. Hogwarts doesn't adapt, it sorts once and never looks again. By their 7th year, students are nothing like the children who first sat beneath the Sorting Hat. Hermione, once rule-obsessed, breaks laws to fight for justice. Draco Malfoy, once a cruel little prince, becomes withdrawn and conflicted. Yet their houses remain fixed, as if frozen in time. No one asks, do they still belong there? No one considers switching houses, shifting paths, or acknowledging that identity is fluid. Hogwarts treats identity as something static. One decision, one colour, forever. Dumbledore once said, it is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. But at Hogwarts that choice is denied. The hat decides, the school obeys. Even if a student grows into something entirely different, their house remains a brand they must wear to the end. Growth is inevitable, but Hogwarts doesn't celebrate it. It locks it in a dormitory and hopes the hat guessed right. Number 13, house points are given randomly. The house point system at Hogwarts looks fair until you watch it in action. One night, Neville Longbottom tries to stop Harry, Ron, and Hermione from sneaking out. For his trouble, Professor McGonagall deducts 50 points from Gryffindor. I'm disgusted, she says. One rule, broken, 50 points lost. But just a few pages later, the same trio gets awarded hundreds of points for bravery, not by McGonagall, but by Dumbledore himself. No rubric, no consistency, just feelings. The system swings from punishment to reward like a pendulum without rhythm. Teachers don't just have power, they have moods. Professor Snape takes 5 points from Harry for cheek, then 10 more just because he feels like it. You don't like the subject, Potter? He sneers. Then perhaps you'll lose another 10 points. There's no oversight, no fairness, no rule book that says this offence equals this many points. One teacher sees a mistake as a learning opportunity. Another sees it as a reason to slash scores. It's not a system. It's a gamble. And it gets worse. Dumbledore, the headmaster himself, waits until the very end of the school year, after Slytherin has already been named the House Cup winner, to drop surprise bonus points on Gryffindor. 1 for Harry, 1 for Ron, 1 for Hermione, and 1 for Neville. "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies," Dumbledore says, "but just as much to stand up to our friends." The crowd goes wild. The banners change. The message is clear. Points don't measure achievement. They serve drama. For 7 years, no one asks questions. Not the students, not the staff, not the parents. What's the value of 10 points? Why is answering a riddle sometimes worth more than saving a classmate from danger? The House Cup, supposedly a symbol of honor, becomes a tool of favoritism and spectacle. Instead of teaching fairness, Hogwarts teaches students that rules bend to the storyteller's will, and that the scoreboard only matters when someone important is watching. Number 14. Houses create artificial conflicts. From the very first day at Hogwarts, every student is divided, not by skill, not by interest, but by personality traits judged by a hat that shouts your fate aloud. Harry Potter was barely seated before hearing the whispers, "Not Slytherin, eh?" He begged, "Not Slytherin, not Slytherin," and the sorting hat obeyed. But the damage was done. From that moment on, Slytherin became the enemy, not because of what they did, but because of what everyone believed about them. The house system builds invisible walls. It whispers that those on the other side are different, dangerous, wrong. Ron Weasley's hatred for Slytherins was instant and unquestioned. "There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin," he told Harry confidently, having never spoken to a single one. And so the idea spread. Children judged one another before ever sharing a class, before knowing each other's names. The tension grows deeper every year. House points make it worse. During the first book's finale, Slytherin won the House Cup, fairly, but at the last second Dumbledore awarded last-minute points to Harry, Ron, Hermione and Neville, just enough to hand Gryffindor the victory. The hall erupted in cheers, except for the Slytherins. Imagine being 11 years old, working hard all year, and watching everything be undone in a single speech. That's not just unfair, that's humiliation. Even sports become a war. The Gryffindor versus Slytherin rivalry in Quidditch is soaked in bitterness. Remember Draco Malfoy calling Hermione a filthy little mudblood during a match? It wasn't just personal, it was house-fueled cruelty. The system doesn't just allow this behavior, it feeds it. At Hogwarts, you're told to be brave, to be clever, to be loyal, but you're never told to be kind to people who wear a different color. Number 15. Heads of house are clearly biased. It was a moment that struck many readers as odd, though few dared to question the sacred structure of Hogwarts. The 4 houses, after all, were meant to represent distinct qualities: bravery, intelligence, loyalty, ambition. But somewhere beneath the surface of this noble division lurked something far less idealistic, a silent endorsement of favoritism deepened by the very people who were supposed to remain impartial. The heads of houses tasked with the well-being of their students often appeared to transform into biased cheerleaders for their own group. The line between guidance and allegiance blurred so frequently that the entire system seemed to rest on a contradiction. Consider Professor Severus Snape, the dark, brooding potions master and head of Slytherin. From the very beginning, Snape's favoritism was not just a suspicion, it was a declaration. His disdain for Gryffindor students, especially Harry Potter, was so blatant it bordered on parody. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Snape deducts points from Gryffindor merely for Harry's fame. When Neville Longbottom melts his cauldron in potions, Snape takes points away from Hermione Granger, who tried to help, not from Neville, who caused the incident. Such behavior doesn't speak of a wise mentor guiding his charges, it reeks of pettiness and partisanship. His favoritism for Slytherins extended far beyond tolerance. He ignored Draco Malfoy's constant taunts, overlooked blatant rule-breaking, and even let Slytherins get away with sabotage. During a Quidditch match when a bludger is tampered with and endangers Harry's life, Snape shows more concern over Slytherin's victory than the safety of a student. In Chamber of Secrets, when Draco calls Hermione a mudblood in the middle of a practice session, there is no record of Snape punishing him. Instead, he dismisses the term as unpleasant, and this wasn't discipline, it was complicity. But favoritism in Hogwarts wasn't limited to the shadowy corners of Snape's dungeons. Professor Minerva McGonagall, the fierce Transfiguration teacher and head of Gryffindor, was often painted as a model of fairness. Yet, her devotion to Gryffindor House sometimes nudged her toward the same partiality she likely despised in her colleague. In Philosopher's Stone, when Harry breaks numerous school rules during his first year, flying without permission, sneaking out at night, breaking into the third-floor corridor, McGonagall chastises him. But when Harry brings home the Quidditch win or confronts Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, those earlier transgressions are forgiven, even rewarded. The point system, meant to be an impartial measure of student behavior, often served as a tool for reinforcing house bias. In Philosopher's Stone, after Gryffindor students lose over 100 points for being out of bed, they suffer public humiliation. Yet at the year's end, Dumbledore conveniently awards last-minute points to Gryffindor for bravery, deserved perhaps but perfectly timed, to tilt the scale in favor of his former house. McGonagall herself hands out points generously to her students while often doubting the motives of others. When Slytherin wins the House Cup fairly, she does nothing to uphold that result before the headmaster's speech reverses the outcome. In a school that claims to foster unity, the heads of house often promote division. Rather than acting as neutral mentors who help students overcome house rivalries, they reinforce them. There's little evidence of Snape mentoring a student from Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw, and even less of McGonagall extending a nurturing hand to a struggling Slytherin. Each professor views the students outside their house with skepticism, sometimes even contempt. In Order of the Phoenix, when Dolores Umbridge becomes Hogwarts High Inquisitor, Snape says nothing while Slytherins abuse their power as her inquisitorial squad. McGonagall, for her part, views the entire situation through the lens of protecting Gryffindor alone. This isn't to say that the professors are cruel or unjust by nature. Rather, it is the system itself that seems flawed, a structure that divides children into 4 rigid categories at the age of 11, and then gives them leaders who are emotionally invested in winning the House Cup, inevitably fosters bias. The professors may believe they are acting in the students' best interests, but their actions often mirror the behavior of fans in a competition, not educators in a learning institution. Slytherin, in particular, suffers from the consequences of this system. The favoritism they receive from Snape further alienates them from the rest of the school. Other houses view them as cheaters, cowards, or elitists, not because they are inherently so, but because no adult ever steps in to dissolve the stereotypes. Instead, the heads of house unintentionally confirm them. When Snape consistently favors Slytherin, and the other professors consistently react with mistrust, the loop tightens. It becomes a prophecy fulfilled not by fate, but by the educators themselves. The students internalize this dynamic quickly. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when the Marauders' old-school rivalry is rekindled through Lupin and Snape's passive-aggressive exchanges, it's evident that even grown men carry their house grudges well into adulthood. This suggests that the house system, far from being a phase of character building, embeds deep divisions. The professors are not immune to the tribalism they help instill. Their behavior tells students that loyalty to house comes before loyalty to justice, compassion, or even truth. Even the praise offered to students is tainted by favoritism. When Harry catches Neville's Remembrall in his first flying lesson, McGonagall, rather than punishing his dangerous stunt, pulls him into the Quidditch team. It's a moment of reward for skill, yes, but would she have done the same if the student were from Slytherin or Hufflepuff? The narrative doesn't suggest so. The message is clear. Certain rule-breaking is permissible if done by the right student from the right house. Number 16. Sorting Hat is not a perfect system. It takes only a few minutes. That's all the time the Sorting Hat needs to decide the trajectory of a child's life. With a whisper, a thought, and a creak of old fabric, The magical hat declares the house that will define a student's friendships, ambitions, and even moral compass. This odd system is treated with reverence in the wizarding world, passed down from the founders themselves, but the more we look at it, the harder it becomes to ignore its flaws. The sorting hat is far from infallible. It's just a hat, a conscious, thinking artifact, yes, but still a piece of enchanted clothing trying to peer into the soul of an 11-year-old in less time than it takes to eat a chocolate frog, and that in itself is unsettling. Consider the case of Neville Longbottom. The hat hovered on his head for what felt like an eternity. Trying to place him, it saw bravery, but also crippling self-doubt. Neville begged, not unlike Harry, to be put in Hufflepuff. He didn't see himself as courageous or bold. He feared he wouldn't fit into the expectations of Gryffindor. But the hat, in its enigmatic judgment, chose Gryffindor anyway. "There's plenty of courage, I see it," the hat must have reasoned. But that decision came not from what Neville believed about himself, but what the hat believed he could become. The problem? It forced a path on him, one he didn't want, at least not then. That raises a vital question. Is the sorting hat placing students where they are now, or where they might be? And who decided the hat should be the one to make that call? The hat listens, that much is clear. Harry Potter's sorting moment is the most cited example of this strange democracy between soul and headwear. "Not Slytherin, not Slytherin," Harry pleaded internally. The hat, sensing ambition and cunning, hesitated. "Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head." But Harry's resistance tipped the scale, and just like that, the house that most aligned with his potential was ruled out. This wasn't objective assessment. It was compromise. The hat didn't declare what Harry was, but rather where he wanted to belong. It shaped his future based on an 11-year-old's emotional panic. That isn't fate. That's guesswork. Slytherin itself is a matter of controversy. If the hat was designed to preserve balance and order among the four founders' values, why does it continue to feed the most dangerous traits, ambition, cunning, and elitism, into one house? Time and again, Slytherin becomes a breeding ground for dark wizards. Tom Riddle, Bellatrix Lestrange, Draco Malfoy, and countless others passed under the brim of that very hat. Either the hat is shockingly bad at detecting evil, or it considers darkness acceptable so long as it fits Salazar Slytherin's profile. That's not sorting, that's enabling. And it leaves students like Draco in a toxic echo chamber where arrogance and cruelty are rarely challenged. Then there's the issue of permanence. Once a student is sorted, they are never re-evaluated, no matter how much they change, grow, or reveal unexpected qualities. The house assignment is final. Hermione Granger had a mind more suited for Ravenclaw, a love of knowledge, unyielding curiosity, and a need to understand. Yet she was placed in Gryffindor most likely because of her determination. But would she have thrived more in Ravenclaw? Would Luna Lovegood, with her unwavering integrity and moral clarity, have benefited from the values of Hufflepuff? We will never know. The hat gives no second chances, no reassignments, and no opportunities for a student's true self to be re-evaluated once puberty sets in and their personality truly begins to take form. The hat seems to define people by their most dominant early traits as if they were fixed. But people are fluid, children especially. They are still discovering who they are. Sorting them so young creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. A student placed in Gryffindor may begin to act braver. One in Ravenclaw may feel pressure to be smarter. Those who don't fit into their house's stereotype may feel like outcasts or worse, frauds. It isn't guidance, it's branding, and for many it becomes a burden. This burden is rarely discussed openly in the books, but its shadow looms. Peter Pettigrew, the traitor among the Marauders, was sorted into Gryffindor. This is perhaps the most damning evidence against the Sorting Hat's judgment. Pettigrew's cowardice and selfishness were evident by adulthood, but perhaps not as an 11-year-old. Still, the hat missed something. Or worse, it misjudged. And the consequences were catastrophic. If Pettigrew had been placed in Slytherin, perhaps he would have found camaraderie among his kind and not betrayed the Potters. Or maybe he would have been swallowed by darkness even faster. But either way, Gryffindor wasn't his true home. The hat got it wrong. Even the hat admits uncertainty. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, it tells Harry that he would have done well in Slytherin. The fact that the hat could waver, argue with itself, or even be persuaded shows its limitations. It is not a seer, not a prophet, not an all-knowing relic. It is an old magical object built on the philosophies of 4 long-dead founders, and its wisdom is bound by their narrow definitions of character. What if a child doesn't fit into any of the 4 types? What if they contain multitudes? The system forces categorization where complexity exists. It boxes children into roles they may not wish to play. This creates not only internal conflict but external division. The House Cup, interhouse competitions, and even seating arrangements reinforce segregation. Rivalries, such as that between Gryffindor and Slytherin, are instilled from day one. The hat doesn't just sort students, it divides them. What begins as playful competition often curdles into prejudice. Snape's disdain for Gryffindors, McGonagall's suspicion of Slytherins, these are not isolated cases. They are symptoms of a culture of division bred by the sorting system itself. Number 17, House Cup devalues actual achievements. In the shadowed halls of Hogwarts, where portraits whisper secrets and staircases shift without warning, one tradition stands tall and glittering, the House Cup. Meant to symbolize the culmination of a year's worth of discipline, intellect, kindness, and bravery, this golden trophy sits proudly in the Great Hall, gleaming beneath enchanted stars. Yet for all its symbolic weight, the system behind awarding the cup often feels like a hollow performance, more theatre than justice. The idea is noble, certainly, to inspire students to do their best, to work for the pride of their house. But beneath the surface, the structure is riddled with inconsistency, partiality, and last-minute decisions that quietly undermine the very virtues the cup was built to celebrate. No example better illustrates this problem than the end of Harry Potter's first year. Throughout the school term, Slytherin had dominated the House Cup standings, accumulating points through academic success, rule-following, and overall cohesion as a house. As the final feast approached, the banners shimmered green and silver, and even Professor McGonagall, normally the picture of composure, acknowledged Slytherin's upcoming victory with something like professional resignation. But then, with a few flicks of Albus Dumbledore's wand and an indulgent smile, the entire narrative shifted. Points were awarded to Harry, Ron, Hermione, and even Neville for acts of courage, loyalty, and moral fortitude during their confrontation with Voldemort and his traps. While their deeds were undeniably brave, the timing of the rewards was not simply dramatic, it was theatrical. Dumbledore himself admitted, "There are all kinds of courage. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends." In that moment, Neville earned 10 points and secured Gryffindor's victory by a single, shining margin. It was a scene designed to evoke applause, a triumphant twist fit for a storybook ending. But it left behind a question that no one at the staff table dared to answer. What about the Slytherins who had studied every night, who had followed the rules, who had earned their points steadily without fanfare? The fundamental flaw in the House Cup lies in the lack of structure guiding how points are awarded. Professors deduct and grant points with wild variability. Severus Snape, for example, removed points from Gryffindor seemingly at whim, docking Harry and his friends for offences that might have earned a Slytherin nothing more than a warning. Meanwhile, McGonagall often bent in the opposite direction, overly generous to her own house. When professors are both judges and partisans, how can any victory be trusted? A system without transparency invites suspicion, and in Hogwarts, suspicion breeds resentment that simmers just beneath the surface. The injustice is not just theoretical, it's emotional. For Ravenclaws who spent months buried in books, mastering arithmancy and ancient runes, only to see their efforts eclipsed by last-minute points for a game of wizard's chess, the message is clear. Quiet diligence matters less than explosive heroism. For Hufflepuffs who volunteer in the greenhouses, support their classmates, and never cause trouble, the end-of-year feast feels like a cruel reminder that virtue must be visible to be rewarded. In a world where the spotlight favors the bold, the dependable are left in the dark. It becomes clear then that the House Cup doesn't just reward bravery, it glamorizes recklessness. Harry, Ron, and Hermione frequently broke rules, snuck out after hours, and endangered themselves and others. Their motivations were noble, yes, but the system conflates rule-breaking with valor. When Dumbledore bestows 50 points for bravery in facing danger that the children were never meant to encounter, he inadvertently sets a precedent. The reward for defying school rules and venturing into forbidden places is not punishment, but praise. What message does that send to students still forming their moral compass? Even the teachers seem uncertain about the system they uphold. Flitwick's delighted squeak when Gryffindor wins the cup, despite Ravenclaw being known for their academic excellence, feels like a sigh of surrender to the school's unspoken favoritism. The ceremony isn't about fairness, it's about the drama. The banners changing colour mid-feast, the stunned expressions of Slytherin students, the uproarious applause of Gryffindor. All of it contributes to a sense that the House Cup is less an award and more a performance. This isn't just a problem of feelings, it's a problem of values. By rewarding dramatic acts of courage in the 11th hour, Hogwarts shifts the focus from consistency to spectacle. The students learn not to be thoughtful, but to be noticed. This undermines the quiet, essential work of those who keep the school running, not with wands drawn, but with books opened and sleeves rolled up. The caretakers of culture, the guardians of order, the quiet thinkers, they vanish behind the noise of late-stage heroics. Even the symbolism of the House Cup becomes distorted. It's meant to foster house unity and pride, but instead it often stokes division. Slytherin, already isolated by reputation and prejudice, sees their one tangible recognition stripped from them by last-minute rewrites of the scoreboard. How can they not feel betrayed? The system punishes them not for doing poorly, but for not being the protagonist. The House Cup, in these moments, stops being a competition and becomes a story device, a reward not for achievement, but for narrative fulfillment. And yet, the problem goes deeper still. The House Cup could be an opportunity to model meritocracy, to teach students that effort, collaboration, and consistency are worthy of honor. Instead, it tells them that who you are and which side of the story you fall on matters more than what you do. The cup isn't won by the best students, but by the most narratively convenient ones. Even Neville's 10 points, as sweet as they were, seem more symbolic than earned. He stood up to friends, yes, brave, but how many other students showed integrity without ever being noticed? Number 18. Houses don't teach different magical styles. The division of students into Hogwarts houses has long been treated as a fundamental part of wizarding education. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin are more than just labels. They are banners under which young witches and wizards forge identities, friendships, and loyalties. Yet when one looks closer, beyond the singing hat and the warm feasts, there lies a curious absence of deeper purpose. The houses do not, despite their philosophical distinctions, offer any meaningful divergence in magical education. The curriculum is the same, the professors are shared, the exams are identical. So why then is the division so fiercely maintained? Consider Hermione Granger. Sorted into Gryffindor, she was known for her insatiable thirst for knowledge, traits more commonly associated with Ravenclaw. Yet she studied magical theory, history, charms, and transfiguration beside students from every house. There was no Gryffindor-specific approach to spellcasting, no bravery-themed enchantments to match her house's creed. The same can be said of Draco Malfoy, whose ambition and cunning defined his place in Slytherin, but he too learned charms from Professor Flitwick and potions from Professor Snape, just like Harry and Ron. There was no secret Slytherin syllabus filled with power-hungry spells or Machiavellian magic. In essence, the house system had no bearing on what students actually learned. This oversight is strange when compared to Muggle educational systems, where different schools or tracks often reflect pedagogical differences. A student in a science-focused school will experience education differently than one in a music academy. But in Hogwarts, the Sorting Hat makes grand pronouncements. Cunning folk use any means, those of wit and learning, brave at heart, only to funnel all students into the same potions class at 9 a.m. It creates an illusion of specialization where none exists. Even electives like arithmancy or care of magical creatures are chosen individually, not based on house affiliation. The uniformity in magical instruction also undercuts the potential for growth in individual strengths. Luna Lovegood, with her dreamy insights and belief in the extraordinary, received no encouragement from Ravenclaw to pursue unorthodox magical theories. There were no classes in experimental charms, no instruction in magical folklore that might have suited her unique mind. Similarly, Neville Longbottom, constantly under pressure in Gryffindor to display bravery, might have thrived with a more nurturing approach. The school did not consider this. His learning was shaped by the same syllabus as everyone else's, regardless of personal struggle or potential. This becomes particularly clear in the Triwizard Tournament. Harry, faced with life-threatening tasks, received help and guidance not through structured education, but through individual relationships, Moody's hints, Cedric's tips, Hermione's research. Hogwarts offered no official training in advanced defensive magic, dueling, or survival techniques tailored to house values or personal skills. Even the DA, where real magical growth occurred, had nothing to do with houses. It was founded out of desperation, not design. Ironically, the DA was more of a true academic specialization than anything the house system ever offered. One might argue that the common rooms provide community, a safe space for students of similar values. Yet even here, the logic frays. Hufflepuff prizes loyalty and kindness, but their dormitory isn't a place of cooperative projects or social magic studies. Ravenclaw's tower is locked behind riddles, suggesting a culture of intellect. Yet inside, students sit by the fire or sleep, not solve ancient magical mysteries or debate metaphysics. The house aesthetics are decorative, not functional. A scarlet bedspread doesn't teach courage. A green stone arch doesn't foster ambition. The physical separation of students ends up reinforcing social cliques rather than facilitating tailored instruction. House competitions, too, are largely symbolic. The point system is arbitrary, subject to favoritism, as seen when Dumbledore awarded last-minute points to Gryffindor in Harry's first year, tipping the scales after Slytherin had won. It was not a reward for academic or magical excellence, but for acts of moral courage, as interpreted by one man. This kind of house reward structure does not incentivize scholarly distinction or magical mastery. It confuses character with curriculum and leaves students like Percy Weasley, who craved recognition through study and discipline, without a clear academic reward system. In practice, the only aspect of education where the house might matter is the social environment. But this can be detrimental, especially for students who don't match their assigned house's stereotype. Take Peter Pettigrew, a Gryffindor who displayed neither courage nor loyalty in the end. His placement failed him. His education did not provide him with tools to overcome his fear or develop moral strength. He was a mouse among lions, and no curriculum helped him adapt. The house gave him no special instruction in bravery, nor was there a support system to nurture his growth. The result? He sought power and safety elsewhere. If Hogwarts had embraced house-based teaching styles, its education could have been revolutionary. Imagine Slytherin students mastering illusion magic, shadow charms, and political enchantments. Spells to influence, deceive, protect. Ravenclaws could study rare magical texts, dissect ancient languages, and experiment with new spell creation. Gryffindors might train in high-risk magical fields, battle magic, protective charms, magical rescue. Hufflepuffs could specialize in healing, magical ethics, and agriculture. Each house would provide an ecosystem for a specific magical philosophy, creating not only experts but distinct magical thinkers. Yet the school's approach remains rigid. The Sorting Hat claims to see deep into students' hearts, yet its conclusions do not influence how those students are taught. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends, it says to Harry, but making friends is not the same as making a career or developing magical identity. The emotional journey of students is shaped more by random events, the troll in the dungeon, the Chamber of Secrets, than by a pedagogical framework. The system lacks foresight. It is reactive, not proactive. Even Snape, one of the most brilliant potion masters, did not adapt his teaching style to favor or challenge his own house. While he was biased, favoring Slytherins in grading, he did not offer them deeper instruction or special potions knowledge. He did not cultivate their ambition through complex brewing or historical alchemy. He simply played favorites. If house divisions truly mattered educationally, professors might have acted like heads of departments, tailoring content to their students' strengths and goals. But Hogwarts doesn't work that way. Its academic structure is horizontal, not vertical. The only time we see any semblance of specialized teaching is with private tutoring, such as when Dumbledore teaches Harry about Horcruxes. But this is secretive, informal, and born of necessity. It's not part of the institutional design, and again, it bypasses the house system entirely. Dumbledore did not teach this to the brave of Gryffindor or the cunning of Slytherin. He taught it to Harry because of prophecy and fate, not curriculum or house affiliation. The most important magical knowledge in the series happens outside the classroom. The limitations of the house system become more evident as students prepare for their futures. Career counseling at Hogwarts is vague, and house identity seems to play no role in vocational guidance. No Slytherin fast-track to politics, no Hufflepuff channel to healing, no Ravenclaw scholars groomed for magical research. The Ministry of Magic does not recruit differently based on house. It recruits based on OWLs and NEWTs, standardized exams taken by all. The most ambitious part of Wizarding Society relies not on magical alignment or specialization, but on a homogenized set of results. When Dolores Umbridge took over the school, her regime exposed the system's flaws. In trying to suppress individuality and limit spellcasting, she met resistance not from the structure of Hogwarts but from the students' willpower. The house system did nothing to protect them. It did not offer diverse approaches to magical resistance. In the end, the unity came from shared purpose and cross-house alliances. When it mattered most, students had to forget their scarves and embrace common goals. In this way, the house system appears more like a narrative device than an educational framework. It creates drama, loyalty, conflict, but not depth in magical training. It assigns colors, not content. It divides dormitories, not minds. And while the friendships and rivalries it fosters can be powerful, they are incidental to learning. The real education at Hogwarts happens in the cracks, in the library at midnight, in secret meetings in the Forbidden Forest, in whispered conversations behind a tapestry. It happens despite the house system, not because of it. Number 19, no mentors or emotional support for students. In the echoing corridors of Hogwarts, amidst the tapestry of moving portraits and flickering torches, one glaring void quietly haunts the structure of its hallowed houses. While the Sorting Hat famously proclaims, "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see," it does far more than assign children to houses. It sets the trajectory for their entire magical education, social circles, and often their adult identities. And yet after this grand proclamation on their very first night, there is no real support system in place to help these children, now housebound, navigate the profound emotional and psychological transformation that comes with growing up in a high-pressure, magical boarding school. The heads of houses are professors, burdened with their own academic and disciplinary roles. Prefects are peers, not professionals. Nowhere in Hogwarts exists an adult who is simply and solely there to help students survive the maze of growing up, especially for those who struggle to fit in. Consider the journey of Neville Longbottom. From the moment he steps foot into Hogwarts, he is branded as clumsy, forgetful, and underwhelming. Sorted into Gryffindor, the House of Bravery, he seems an ill fit beside the likes of Harry, Ron, and Hermione. He loses his toad, forgets passwords, and becomes the butt of many jokes. Professor McGonagall, his head of house, is stern and distant, though not unkind, but she is not there to offer emotional reassurance. Her primary responsibility is teaching transfiguration and maintaining discipline. Neville's personal struggles, self-doubt, fear, grief over his parents' fate, go largely unnoticed by the adults around him. If it weren't for the occasional encouragement from Professor Lupin in third year or the camaraderie of Dumbledore's army, one wonders if he would have ever emerged from the shell of mediocrity others forced him into. It's easy to forget that Hogwarts is not merely a school of magic, but a home for hundreds of children, some of whom carry immense trauma. Harry himself is the most obvious example, an orphan abused by his guardians, tossed into a world he doesn't understand. And while Dumbledore watches over him from afar, the headmaster never provides consistent emotional support. Harry is left to process nightmares, isolation, the trauma of Cedric's death, and the burden of prophecy largely on his own. The closest thing he has to guidance are his friends and, occasionally, teachers who take a fleeting interest. Would it have been so difficult for each house to have an assigned adult mentor, not a disciplinarian or a magical expert, but someone who simply asks, "How are you really doing?" Draco Malfoy, too, is a case study in what goes wrong when there is no emotional infrastructure. Groomed by his father to embrace pureblood ideals, surrounded by the toxic echo chamber of Slytherin, and eventually coerced into becoming a Death Eater, Draco is the perfect storm of pride, fear, and loneliness. His cries for help are subtle but undeniable. The bathroom breakdown in Half-Blood Prince, where he weeps in front of a mirror, wand shaking in his hand, is one of the rare moments his mask slips. Snape, as head of Slytherin, protects him from the consequences of his darker affiliations, but never offers true guidance. There is no moment where anyone steps in to ask Draco why he's changing, why he looks so pale, why he's disappearing during the night. In a different system, one where house mentors existed, perhaps Draco would have had the chance to confess his fears before it was too late. Luna Lovegood's experience adds yet another layer. An eccentric girl from Ravenclaw, she is often ostracized, her belongings stolen, her beliefs mocked. Yet no adult seems to notice or intervene. There's no counselor to help her process grief after her mother's death, no mentor to assure her that her strangeness is not a flaw. Luna endures Hogwarts with ethereal detachment, surviving not because she is supported, but because she has learned how to be alone. She is resilient, yes, but she shouldn't have had to be. Even Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, is not immune to the pressures of growing up in Hogwarts. In her third year, she crumbles under the weight of overachievement, using a time turner to attend multiple classes simultaneously. Her descent into stress-induced isolation is visible, snapping at friends, falling asleep in the library, nearly breaking down. And yet the adults around her, including Professor McGonagall, who gave her the time turner, do not step in until the very end. There is no conversation about balance, no emotional check-in, no offer of help beyond logistics. Would a dedicated mentor have noticed her exhaustion sooner? Would Hermione have felt less alone if someone had reminded her that excellence should not come at the cost of well-being? The lack of adult mentorship is felt even more deeply in moments of crisis. After Cedric's death in Goblet of Fire, the student body is shaken. A student has died in the middle of a school event, murdered. Yet we see no grief counsellors, no group sessions, no space for mourning. Life simply continues. Dumbledore gives a brief speech, but it is Harry who must bear the weight of trauma. Remember, Cedric, remember if the time should come when you have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy. But remembering is not healing, and no one helps Harry, or any of them, to heal. There is something unsettling in the way Hogwarts isolates its students emotionally. Its structure assumes that children either have the tools to navigate complex feelings or they'll figure it out on their own. But that isn't education. That's abandonment dressed in enchanted robes. The magical world is fraught with dangers, from curses and magical creatures to internal battles of identity, morality, and trauma. And still Hogwarts leaves these children without a dedicated adult whose sole role is to care for their emotional well-being. The prefect system is no substitute. Prefects are 16-year-olds tasked with overseeing younger peers. They are not trained in empathy, psychology, or conflict resolution. They are simply older students with rule-enforcing authority. When Percy Weasley becomes a prefect, his obsession with rules alienates rather than supports. When Ron and Hermione take on the role, they are still navigating their own adolescent crises. No one teaches them how to support others. They are ultimately children supervising children. In Order of the Phoenix, the Ministry's interference and the rise of Umbridge throw the school into turmoil. Students are punished for speaking truth. Fear hangs over every corridor. And still there is no one to confide in. Dumbledore has withdrawn, the teachers are silenced, and the only sanctuary becomes the student-led Dumbledore's army. It's telling that teenagers must form a secret group just to feel seen, understood, and empowered. Ginny Weasley's growth is another quiet tragedy. Traumatized in her first year by Tom Riddle's diary, she spends much of her early Hogwarts years in the shadow of others. Her strength and humor blossom later, but one wonders how different her path might have been if an adult mentor had helped her process the horrors of the Chamber of Secrets. No first year should be left to cope with possession and near death on their own. The Weasleys are a loving family, but at Hogwarts she is just another student trying to survive a system that offers no soft place to land. The magical portraits, ghosts, and even house elves sometimes offer more comfort than the living staff. The fat lady consoles students with gossip, nearly headless. Nick offers vague wisdom, and Dobby, the free elfie whim, is the only one who tries to save Harry's life in his second year. It is absurd that a house elf shows more concern for student well-being than most adults in charge. Would it truly undermine the grandeur of Hogwarts to have adult mentors whose job is not potions or charms, but kindness? Imagine if Ravenclaws had a resident counselor to help students manage their perfectionism, if Slytherins had someone to guide ambition without cruelty, if Hufflepuffs had a listener for their feelings of invisibility, if Gryffindors had someone to explain that courage also means asking for help. These roles wouldn't diminish the house identity. They would deepen it. It is no coincidence that the strongest bonds in Hogwarts are forged not between student and teacher, but student and peer. Harry, Ron, and Hermione lean on each other because they have no one else. Luna, Neville, and Ginny become family not through shared classes, but shared survival. Hogwarts, for all its wonder, leaves its students to fend for themselves in the emotional wilderness, and somehow they still emerge strong, not because the system supported them, but despite it. Number 20. Some houses get better living conditions. It is an undeniable truth of Hogwarts architecture that some houses were born into privilege, while others were quietly assigned to corners of stone and shadow. Gryffindor Tower rises high above the castle, a warm and radiant space with golden lamps, red velvet armchairs, and a fireplace that seems to smile with its flames. Slytherin, by contrast, though buried deep in the dungeons, enjoys a different sort of elegance, a cool, underwater serenity with its greenish glow from the Black Lake and its sense of exclusivity. But for Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, their common rooms are far less defined in the collective memory. Their placement is mentioned in passing as if their comfort mattered less, and this silence speaks volumes. There is no suggestion that their environments were designed with the same care, love, or even funding as those of the more glorified houses. Ravenclaw's common room is said to be a circular room at the top of a tower, accessible only by answering a riddle. It's a clever concept, meant to challenge the wit of its inhabitants, but it also functions as an exclusionary barrier. What if a tired or upset student simply wanted to go to bed without having to solve a philosophical puzzle? What if someone forgot an important book inside but couldn't get back in because their mind was too clouded by stress to think clearly? Hogwarts claims to nurture every kind of brilliance, but Ravenclaws must prove their intelligence constantly, or they remain locked out of their own home. Hufflepuff's situation is even more revealing. Their common room lies near the kitchens, in the basement, and is described as cozy and welcoming, low ceilings, round doors, and lots of plants. But its placement near the kitchens has always carried the quiet connotation of servitude. It's no coincidence that the house associated with loyalty and hard work, traits often exploited rather than celebrated, is placed closest to the labouring heart of the school. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry visits the kitchens with Dobby, he finds that the house elves work just a corridor away from Hufflepuff's common room. What message does that send to young witches and wizards? That the house founded on fairness belongs near the workers? That it's the house most closely tied to servitude? Meanwhile, Gryffindor students ascend a winding staircase and pass through a portrait of the Fat Lady to enter their plush quarters. The common room is always filled with light, laughter, and a sense of triumph. Even in The Prisoner of Azkaban, when Sirius Black breaks into Hogwarts, the common room remains untouched, safe, and sacred. In contrast, there is no record of what security features the other houses have, no mention of elaborate passwords or portraits that double as gatekeepers. There's a silent assumption that Gryffindor's comfort and safety are worth chronicling, while the rest are barely worth describing. When Harry first visits the Slytherin common room in the Chamber of Secrets under the guise of Polyjuice Potion, he finds it to be grand and imposing, a long, low underground room with green lamps and high-backed black chairs. Its tone is cold, but it matches the pride and ambition of its residents. There is a thematic harmony here, albeit a somewhat elitist one. The space mirrors the values of the house. Yet nowhere in the series is there an equivalent tour through the common rooms of Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw. The readers, and the students, are left to imagine them, to fill in the blanks with guesses rather than vivid, concrete images. This lack of visibility creates a hierarchy not just of values but of existence itself. In the Deathly Hallows, when the final battle is looming and the students are preparing for war, the Gryffindor common room becomes a war room, the fireplace roars, the map is consulted, and decisions are made. But what about the other houses? Were their rooms equally suited to this kind of action? Did Hufflepuff's low ceilings and cozy cushions give way to strategy? Did Ravenclaw's riddled door pose a hindrance when time was of the essence? We don't know because we were never invited in, and that's the problem. Hogwarts may claim to sort students by qualities, but it treats some qualities with greater infrastructure, narrative weight, and importance than others. The Great Hall may bring everyone together, but the moment meals are over, the school becomes 4 separate kingdoms. Each house retreats to its tower, its dungeon, its chamber, all of them physically and symbolically separated from each other. This division is not neutral. It affects how students see themselves and how they interact. It builds walls, not just in stone, but in identity. A Gryffindor may look at their grand fireplace and feel like a hero. A Hufflepuff, surrounded by cheerful but humble decor, may internalize that they are meant for the background, not the spotlight. Hogwarts tells them these roles are natural, even magical, but they are not equal. Neville Longbottom, a Gryffindor, was allowed to become a hero largely within the secure and supportive environment of Gryffindor Tower. He had the privacy to cry, the company to grow, and the security to heal from his failures. But what if Neville had been sorted into Hufflepuff? Would his journey have been the same, with less narrative presence in a room never once described in detail? Would he have had the space, emotionally and physically, to become who he was meant to be? Or would he have quietly done his duty, unnoticed, near the kitchens, never given the chance to shout Dumbledore's army in front of a roaring fire? Cho Chang, a Ravenclaw, is introduced to us mostly in passing. Her common room, high above the rest, becomes a metaphor for her emotional isolation. After Cedric Diggory's death, she cries in corners, not in welcoming hearth-lit spaces. If her tower was supposed to offer clarity and brilliance, why did it feel so distant and cold? Perhaps because its design, while intellectually flattering, lacks warmth. Perhaps because being smart isn't the same as being nurtured. It is not merely about decor, it is about what the decor tells the students about their value. The Gryffindor common room screams courage and prestige, the Slytherin dungeon whispers power and heritage, the Ravenclaw tower murmurs intellect and solitude. The Hufflepuff basement, though kind and filled with plants, remains quiet and invisible. If equality existed at Hogwarts, these symbolic messages would be balanced, but they are not. Instead, they reflect an institution that favors certain traits and their students over others, with architecture as propaganda. Even the manner in which students access their common rooms speaks to disparity. A Gryffindor must remember a password, a Slytherin must speak it to a blank wall, a Hufflepuff must tap a specific barrel. But if they get it wrong, they are doused in vinegar. No other house punishes a mistake with a physical consequence. It's played for laughs, perhaps, but the subtext is grim. Only Hufflepuffs are humiliated by their house's security system. It's an ancient school, yes, but some of these customs feel like cruel jokes carved into stone. When Cedric Diggory dies in Goblet of Fire, the school mourns, but Hufflepuff's grief remains quiet. His common room is never visited, his friends are never shown consoling each other. Compare this to the aftermath of Dumbledore's death, where the entire student body, and particularly the Gryffindors, are given pages of emotional closure. Infrastructure is not just walls and windows. It's about presence, memory, and recognition. Cedric was a champion, yet his space was treated as if it didn't matter. His legacy was housed in silence. The books argue that each house is equal in merit, but that claim rings hollow when Gryffindor and Slytherin are the only ones truly given spaces that reflect their supposed grandeur. Ravenclaws are isolated in the clouds, Hufflepuffs tucked away underground, and both are ignored in narrative and design. If Hogwarts is meant to teach cooperation, then it has failed at the architectural level. It teaches division, it glorifies certain traits and literally builds them into its stones. The rest must simply make do. The Sorting Hat sings about unity and warns against division, but it places children into unequal homes and hopes they won't notice. It divides them not just by personality, but by ceiling height, by view, by light, by luxury. It creates a miniature class system, one that mirrors the world they're meant to change. When Hermione Granger advocates for equality, whether for house elves or half-bloods, she never once questions why her own common room is so much more comfortable than the others. Perhaps she never thought to. Perhaps that's how power works. Quietly, through privilege that feels normal. In the end, Hogwarts is not just a school. It is a map of the wizarding world's hidden hierarchies, etched in stone and spell. Some students look out over the grounds from towering windows. Others sit underground, waiting for someone to notice they were never offered a view at all. Number 21. No real interaction between houses. In the vast candlelit halls of Hogwarts Castle, where portraits whisper and staircases shift with minds of their own, there lies a silent flaw stitched deep into the fabric of its traditions. A flaw so deeply ingrained that even the brightest minds never seem to question it. The house system, that ancient sorting ritual meant to guide young witches and wizards toward greatness, instead becomes a tool for quiet division, while cloaked in noble ideals, courage, wisdom, loyalty, ambition. It often fosters separation so complete that a student can spend 7 years at Hogwarts without truly knowing a soul outside their own house. The Sorting Hat itself warns of this peril in its songs, but the caution is drowned out by cheers and banners every September 1st. Though house may put you in your place, it sings in Order of the Phoenix, you still must work together. Yet, after the last note fades, reality sets in. 4 common rooms, 4 dining table sections, 4 dormitories, and rarely a bridge between them. Students, particularly the quiet or misunderstood, retreat into the comfort or confinement of their house, and the years slip by in a haze of sameness. Consider the case of Millicent Bulstrode, a Slytherin girl, mentioned only briefly throughout the series. She shares a scuffle with Hermione during Chamber of Secrets, and little else is known of her. But what if that's not a failure of narrative, but a reflection of her reality? A Slytherin girl, not particularly liked or socially gifted, might have lived all 7 years behind the dungeon walls of her common room, interacting only with those the Sorting Hat declared her kin. No collaborative essays with Ravenclaws, no potions brewed alongside Hufflepuffs, no late-night astronomy projects with Gryffindors. Only the same voices, the same assumptions, and the same rivalries passed down like heirlooms. This isolation is not confined to Slytherin, though the stigma they bear makes their case the most tragic. Ravenclaws, though praised for their intellect, often appear aloof and solitary. Luna Lovegood is a poignant example. Though technically accepted within her own house, she is rarely seen interacting with fellow Ravenclaws in a meaningful way. Her closest friends are Gryffindors, not by structural design but by narrative necessity. Imagine instead a Hogwarts where Luna had been encouraged to collaborate with others from the beginning. Her ideas, strange as they may seem, could have flourished in an environment where houses were not walls, but walkways. The daily structure of the school reinforces this partition. Meals are taken in house clusters, classes are paired only occasionally between 2 houses, and extracurricular activities rarely breach the divide. Even Quidditch, the school's most celebrated sport, is built upon opposition. Every game pits house against house, instilling pride but also entrenching rivalry. There are no mixed-house teams, no inter-house cooperation on the pitch, only the unyielding drumbeat of us versus them. The Tri-Wizard Tournament, and that rare spectacle of inter-school unity, ironically features individual champions, not teams, and requires life-threatening feats to foster bonding. By 6th and 7th year, the impact of this system begins to crystallize. Students have spent most of their formative years surrounded by those who mirror their own traits. Gryffindors encourage boldness, Slytherin's ambition, Hufflepuff's loyalty, Ravenclaw's wit. But what happens when those virtues go unchallenged? What happens when a Gryffindor never truly engages with a Slytherin beyond sneers in corridors? The student may leave Hogwarts with a wand, a diploma, and a sense of moral certainty, but utterly unprepared to navigate the complexities of people who think differently. Even Harry Potter, the series' moral centre, falls prey to this trap. Though he occasionally interacts with students from other houses, Cho Chang of Ravenclaw, Cedric Diggory of Hufflepuff, his closest circle remains firmly Gryffindor. He shares a dormitory with Ron, strategizes with Hermione, and laughs with Neville and Dean. The only Slytherins he knows are antagonists. Draco Malfoy is painted with a single stroke for much of the series, and Harry never questions that image until the war forces him to. "You're wrong," he cries at Voldemort in Deathly Hallows. "Draco Malfoy is not a killer." A revelation reached far too late. The magical world prizes unity against dark forces, yet Hogwarts often teaches division. Imagine instead a required 7th-year capstone project, a group assignment with randomly assigned mixed-house members, a Slytherin, a Gryffindor, a Hufflepuff, and a Ravenclaw forced to work together, to negotiate differences, to find shared purpose. The sparks that could fly not only of conflict, but of creation, might prepare students for the true wizarding world, where success depends not on house loyalty, but on understanding. This structural flaw is not merely academic, it bleeds into emotional development. Students grow attached to their house not only as a community, but as an identity. When that identity becomes rigid, it leaves no room for curiosity. Hermione Granger, as brilliant as she is, dismisses divination as nonsense because it clashes with her logical Ravenclaw-like mindset, despite being a Gryffindor. She mocks Luna's beliefs and ridicules Trelawney's predictions. One wonders what might have changed if she had worked alongside a Hufflepuff who saw value in intuition, or a Slytherin who prized subtlety. Then there's the matter of adult figures. Heads of house are rarely shown interacting beyond formal staff meetings. McGonagall, Sprout, Flitwick, and Snape each care deeply for their own, but where are the cross-house mentorships? Where are the collaborations that model unity? Snape, with all his complexity, is defined by house loyalty taken to the extreme. He protects students not because they are children, but because they are Slytherin children. And when he insults Hermione's appearance or deducts points from Gryffindor, the students learn not justice, but tribalism. The war that consumes the final books is a direct mirror of this flawed upbringing. Voldemort has not sought his followers by house. He recruits the bitter, the ignored, the ambitious, and the afraid. And those who oppose him must learn, rapidly, how to work together despite years of artificial separation. The DA meetings are the first real taste of interhouse unity. There, in the room of requirement, the walls fall away. Luna, Ernie Macmillan, Cho, Padma Patil, they train together, laugh together, resist together, and the result? The strongest magic in the series, the kind born of friendship, not house banners. Yet this comes too late for many. By then lines are drawn, trust is fragile, and the cost of misunderstanding is high. Think of Severus Snape, ostracized as a student, clinging to house identity as his only armor. What if a young Gryffindor had taken the time to know him? What if his love for Lily had been matched by respect from others outside Slytherin? Could his path have been different? Could the school, by design, have saved him from himself? The founders, for all their brilliance, planted seeds of pride that outgrew their purpose. Godric Gryffindor valued bravery, but what he feared was cowardice. Salazar Slytherin prized ambition, but he mistrusted difference. Their legacies, preserved in stone and speech, shaped a school that sorts children into categories far too soon and offers too little to help them transcend those boundaries. The Sorting Hat itself laments this in Goblet of Fire. Too long we've been divided, we must unite within, or else we'll crumble from within. And crumble it nearly does. The Battle of Hogwarts is a chaotic frenzy of loyalty, love, and reckoning, but perhaps the real battle is quieter, internal, and lifelong. It is the battle to see past the house scarves, to learn not just spells and history, but empathy and understanding. Hogwarts has the power to teach this, but only if it chooses to. Until then, many students will continue to graduate as strangers to 3/4 of their peers, carrying not only wands but biases shaped by a childhood spent in magical isolation. Number 22. Kids of all ages live together without rules. In the flickering firelight of the Gryffindor common room, a strange image often unfolds. A cluster of first-year students, no taller than their broomsticks, huddled in whispers near the hearth, while a group of seventh years drape themselves across the best armchairs, laughing loudly, books forgotten at their feet. There is no divider between them, no designated space that recognizes the vast gulf in maturity, responsibility, or even emotional development. It is Hogwarts' unspoken rule, or more accurately, its dangerous oversight, that children aged 11 must coexist day and night with 17-year-old teenagers in the same communal spaces. One might call it tradition. But tradition without structure is just chaos waiting for consequence. The system assumes something miraculous, that teenagers nearing adulthood will act as mentors or guardians to their much younger housemates. Yet that assumption is hardly ever explored in the books. Where are the rules? Who enforces a culture of kindness? When Hermione Granger first arrived at Hogwarts, she was met not with mentoring arms, but with glares and muttered insults. Even within her own house, older students didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. Percy Weasley, a seventh-year prefect during her early years, wasn't exactly the nurturing type. Officious, yes, protective, rarely. The prefect system itself is fragile, often more symbolic than functional. There are only 2 prefects per house per year, and their authority seems focused more on patrolling corridors than managing the delicate social balance of a mixed-age common room. The idea of mentorship sounds lovely, in theory. But what happens when reality steps in with its teenage egos, its insecurities, and its cruelty? Let us remember Draco Malfoy in his 5th year, using his seniority and influence to insult and intimidate younger students, even members of his own house. There is no evidence that Slytherin first years received any real protection from him. Instead, they likely learned quickly to stay out of his way. Even Crabbe and Goyle, hardly the poster boys for empathy, had their own sphere of dominance. Within such an atmosphere, how safe would a nervous 11-year-old feel after lights out, surrounded by teenagers, hardened by their own social battles and ambitions? One might argue that house loyalty creates unity, yet unity is not the same as safety. When Harry returns to Gryffindor Tower after the ordeal with the Philosopher's Stone, he is treated like a hero by his housemates. But would a first-year Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff have been embraced in the same way by their seniors? The books rarely show cross-year affection unless it serves the plot. The Weasley twins' affection for Harry being an exception, not the rule. The underlying issue remains the lack of structured support for the youngest students in the most emotionally vulnerable place, or their living quarters. There are no designated junior corners or quiet zones. There are no house-trained counselors. It is all left to the mysterious workings of house spirit, as if camaraderie can solve every human dynamic. Imagine the chaos in the Hufflepuff common room during exam season, 7th years pulling all-nighters, slamming textbooks on the table, muttering incantations under their breath, while first years try to read a simple charms assignment with trembling fingers. Or consider the Slytherin dormitory, deep in the dungeons where older students might return from a late-night meeting of the inquisitorial squad and order the youngest ones to fetch their cloaks or clean their boots. Behavior likely brushed off as house discipline. None of this is ever addressed by the staff. The adults of Hogwarts, admirable in many ways, appear curiously detached from what unfolds after curfew, out of sight, out of mind. There is no mention of curfews per age, no bedtimes adjusted to developmental needs, no quiet hours enforced for younger students. Seamus Finnegan was known to create small explosions in the dormitory, amusing perhaps, but also an indication that there were no serious controls over what students could do in shared spaces. What happens when older students bring contraband items into the common room? Do first years even know their rights? Are they expected to report upper-year misconduct, knowing that it might mean social exile or even subtle retaliation? Neville Longbottom offers a poignant example of how young students can be chewed up by the system. Timid, clumsy, and often frightened, he was mocked not only by students from other houses, but sometimes by his own. In the Order of the Phoenix, he finally begins to come into his own, 5 years later. For most of his time at Hogwarts, he had to sleep in the same dormitory as boys who didn't understand him and who didn't try to. There was no escape from that environment. The dormitory was not a sanctuary, it was a crucible. Is that really what a magical education should feel like? Contrast this with Muggle schools, where classrooms and social spaces are age-based and emotional development is understood as gradual. Even boarding schools often separate younger and older students, ensuring that mentorship happens in structured environments, not chaotic free-for-alls. Hogwarts, for all its grandeur, ignores these basics. There is something almost medieval in its approach. Throw them all into the fire and let the strong sort themselves out. Perhaps that's why so many students graduate with battle scars we never hear about. If the common rooms were divided into age zones, imagine the difference it could make. A quiet reading corner for first through third years, a social study area for the middle years, a private discussion space for the seventh years to stress about their NEWTs without terrifying 11-year-olds in the process. Small changes could lead to a healthier emotional environment with space to grow and breathe. Instead, every night becomes a lesson in social survival. The brave thrive, the quiet endure. Even within the Gryffindor dormitories, the shared sleeping quarters, 5 boys to a room, 5 girls to another, offer no privacy, no personal space. Ron Weasley complains more than once about the noise, the mess, the interruptions. When Harry has nightmares about Voldemort, there is nowhere to go. In the Goblet of Fire, after witnessing Cedric's death, Harry retreats to his bed, closing the curtains, the only privacy Hogwarts offers. That image alone speaks volumes, curtains, not walls. A symbolic gesture towards solitude, but never the real thing. The most telling silence comes from Dumbledore himself. Wise, kind, enigmatic, and completely absent from these day-to-day realities. His concern is grand, defeating evil, inspiring greatness, but he doesn't step into the common room to see how that greatness is nurtured, or not. The staff, from McGonagall to Snape, focus on discipline in public spaces, not emotional safety in private ones. And so the problems fester. Students like Colin Creevey, full of excitement and innocence, must navigate their first year surrounded by teenagers who might roll their eyes or worse. There's also the question of power. Older students have more magic, more control, more knowledge. And that imbalance isn't always used kindly. In Half-Blood Prince, we see just how dangerous magical pranks can be when unsupervised. Romilda Vane tries to drug Harry with a love potion. What if she had tested it on a younger student first? There's no indication that common rooms are monitored for this sort of risk. The trust system only works if everyone is trustworthy, or a dangerous bet in any community, magical or not. House loyalty can't fix everything. When Fred and George Weasley dropped out of school in a blaze of fireworks their common room celebrated. But what message did that send to the younger students watching in awe? That rebellion is glamorous. That rules are optional? The first years cheering in the back corners might remember that moment for years, not as a joke, but as a model. The absence of mentorship is not neutral. It creates spaces where the loudest, boldest, or most reckless set the tone. So, the books show us many things. Heroism, friendship, love, sacrifice. But they rarely show us what it's like to be a scared, quiet first year trying to fall asleep in a room with boys who snore, argue, and joke loudly into the night. Or to study at a table where sixth years toss dung bombs just for fun. The charm of Hogwarts is real, but it comes at a cost. And that cost, for many, is a childhood shaped by the whims of those older, stronger, and louder than they are. Number 23. Students can't choose houses that match goals. The sorting hat may be one of the most iconic elements in the Harry Potter universe, but when examined closely, its decision-making process reveals a deep flaw in the structure of Hogwarts itself. A young student, barely 11, sits nervously on a stool, their entire academic and personal future decided in under a minute by a piece of enchanted cloth. The premise may seem whimsical, even charming, but what happens when a student's dreams and ambitions are tossed aside in favor of vague personality traits? Hogwarts is a place that claims to foster talent, but what if your natural talents don't align with your assigned house? What if your biggest passion lies in potions, and yet the sorting hat places you in a house that offers little access to the resources you need? Consider the case of a student like Ellie Marsh, a Muggle-born witch from a small Yorkshire village who had been fascinated with chemistry from the moment she first watched her father mix vinegar and baking soda to create a bubbling foam. When she received her Hogwarts letter, her obsession shifted seamlessly into the magical counterpart, potions. She devoured every book on the subject she could find. She had dreams of one day apprenticing under Severus Snape himself, of working in the restricted dungeons of the castle, perfecting antidotes and inventing new brews. But when her turn came to wear the sorting hat, it hummed thoughtfully for only a second before declaring Hufflepuff. Ellie clapped, smiled, and walked to her new house table, but a part of her already knew she wouldn't be making those dreams come true. The harsh truth is that potions, while technically taught to all students, is deeply associated with Slytherin. The classroom is located in the dungeons, close to the Slytherin common room. The subject's most renowned teacher, Severus Snape, favors Slytherins openly, even grading them more generously, as seen when he gives Draco Malfoy glowing praise, while routinely mocking and belittling Gryffindors like Neville Longbottom. Potions Club meetings often take place near Slytherin territory, and invitations are rarely extended to those from Hufflepuff or Gryffindor unless they are exceptionally talented. For someone like Ellie, there would be no special mentoring, no access to Slytherin-specific networks, no informal learning beyond the classroom. Her love for potions would remain just that, a love unfulfilled and unsupported. This kind of mismatch is not a rare anomaly, it's built into the system. Let's take another example. Neville Longbottom, a boy whose talents in herbology were extraordinary, whose empathy for magical plants and natural remedies surpassed that of most adult wizards. Yet he was placed in Gryffindor, not Hufflepuff, where patience and a love of nature are defining traits. Gryffindor's culture didn't naturally encourage his strengths. He struggled in nearly every subject except herbology, his self-esteem shattered by constant ridicule from Snape and pressure to live up to the house's brave legacy, one might argue. The Gryffindor was where he learned courage, but one must also ask, was it courage or survival? J.K. Rowling writes that the sorting hat takes your choice into account. We see this with Harry Potter himself, who pleaded not Slytherin and was granted his wish. But how many students, unfamiliar with the school, its politics and its professors, even know what to ask for? Most have never set foot in Hogwarts before the ceremony. They do not understand the implications of each house or how it will shape their lives. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the hat tells Harry, "You could be great, you know, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that." But Harry, influenced by Hagrid's bias and Draco Malfoy's arrogance, rejects the idea based on emotion. Not understanding, it becomes clear that Hogwarts doesn't allow for a system in which a student can choose their academic path with autonomy. It presumes that bravery, cunning, loyalty, or wisdom are the only categories that matter, but real people, real children, are more nuanced than that. Interests and passions don't always align with personality traits. A Ravenclaw might be a genius in magical theory but dread public speaking. A Slytherin might dream of teaching yet never be trusted with children. A Hufflepuff could want to duel professionally, while a Gryffindor might be deeply afraid of confrontation but loves ancient runes. The system lacks flexibility, nuance, and compassion. Take Hermione Granger, for instance, a textbook Ravenclaw in every way, scholarly, inquisitive, detail-oriented, and obsessed with learning. Yet she ends up in Gryffindor apparently for her bravery. But what bravery! At 11, she was simply a bright child with a strong moral compass. Her courage developed later, but the Sorting Hat didn't see her as someone who could contribute to the vast body of magical knowledge. Instead, it saw her as a sidekick to the hero. As a result, she spent her school years risking her life for causes others initiated, when she could have led a completely different path, inventing new spells or revolutionizing wizard lore from within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Even Harry Potter himself, the protagonist, is a victim of this rigidity. He excelled in defense against the dark arts, possessed a natural talent for leadership, and had a strong sense of justice. Had he been placed in Hufflepuff, he might have developed greater empathy and patience. In Ravenclaw, he may have become an academic force. In Slytherin, he could have mastered strategy. Instead, he was shoved into Gryffindor and forced into the mold of the Chosen One, whether he wanted to be or not. Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart, the Sorting Hat sang. But bravery is not the only ingredient for greatness. Moreover, the house system creates an echo chamber. Students mainly interact within their houses. Common rooms are closed off. Schedules often overlap more with housemates than students from other houses. There are few interdisciplinary clubs or shared projects that encourage mixing. So if you're placed in a house that doesn't value your interest, like Ellie with her potions, it becomes incredibly difficult to find peers or mentors who do. You're left to cultivate your passion in solitude or suppress it entirely. And let's not forget the systemic biases of the teachers themselves. Snape favors Slytherin, McGonagall protects Gryffindor, and the other professors rarely challenge this imbalance. Ellie in Hufflepuff once submitted a complex potion adaptation in third year combining elements of the Pepper-Up potion and a fire protection draft, but received only a curt, acceptable from Snape. Had she been in Slytherin, would he have seen her work as ambitious and innovative, or at least acknowledge the effort? The entire system rests on the false idea that one personality trait determines everything else. Yet by adulthood, we know that most people possess traits from multiple houses: a brave Ravenclaw, a cunning Hufflepuff, a loyal Slytherin. Sorting children into houses may create narrative simplicity, but it sacrifices human complexity. Hogwarts prides itself on being the finest school of magic in the world, yet it makes a life-altering decision based on a few vague whispers between a hat and a child. This is especially frustrating considering the richness of the wizarding world. Careers range from magi zoologists to unspeakables to wand makers. Yet there is no guidance system in Hogwarts that aligns your house, subjects, and talents with any long-term goals. You study what you're told, not what you love. You're sorted where the hat feels you belong, not where you can grow. Where is the mentorship? Where is the choice? There's a haunting irony in the fact that the wizarding world, with all its magic, still follows a rigid, antiquated system that discourages personal agency. The hat speaks, and the path is sealed. The castle decides who you are before you even know who you want to be. In Ellie's 7th year, she brewed a potion so effective it cured a fellow student of venomous tentacular burns in seconds. It wasn't part of a class. It wasn't for a grade. It was something she did on her own time, with ingredients she had begged from the greenhouse and scrounged from behind the kitchen. No one saw it. No one cared. In the end, it's not that the Sorting Hat makes bad decisions, it's that it makes final ones. And in a world built on magic, it's strange how little room there is for a second chance. Number 24. No academic focus per house. It always felt strange that the 4 houses of Hogwarts, so rigorously sorted based on values and personality traits, didn't reflect any academic distinction. Gryffindors, known for their daring and nerve, studied the same lessons as the cautious Hufflepuffs. Ravenclaws, with their thirst for knowledge, shared their syllabus with Slytherins, whose ambitions often lay in power rather than wisdom. The house system was painted as a structure of ideals: courage, intelligence, loyalty, cunning. But in practice, the students followed a standard magical curriculum, wearing different colors and sitting at separate tables, but otherwise receiving the same education. This absence of house-based academic specialization left a strange hollowness in the heart of Hogwarts design. Hermione Granger, for instance, was clearly a Ravenclaw in all but name. She devoured books on ancient runes and arithmancy with an enthusiasm unmatched in her year. Yet she ended up in Gryffindor, where bravery trumped academic curiosity. If the house system was truly about guiding students into environments where their traits could blossom into skill, wouldn't Hermione have thrived more in a setting that prioritized intellectual rigor? Her teachers often commented on her precision, her scholarly discipline. Professor Vector was clearly impressed by Hermione's command of arithmancy, and Bathsheba Babbling once remarked that Hermione's translation of the Elder Futhark texts was, frankly, more elegant than the textbook's rendering. Still, Hermione attended the same charms class as Ron Weasley, whose interests rarely aligned with spell construction or theory. They both learned Lumos and Alohomora, whether or not they were curious about the nature of magical light or the ethics of unlocking doors without permission. There was no divergence in the path for those who wanted to understand why a charm worked versus those content to memorize its incantation. This lack of differentiation made the house system feel like little more than a sorting hat ceremony and a scarf color. Ravenclaws, supposedly the scholars of the school, had no special classes in logic-based magic, analytical thinking, or historical research. Luna Lovegood, who floated through corridors with ethereal grace and odd insights, never seemed to have a space where her unusual intellect could be honed. She shared classes with students who mocked her. Why wasn't there a faculty track in Ravenclaw focused on spell invention or metaphysical theory, where minds like hers could be nurtured rather than misjudged? Similarly, Hufflepuff was reduced to a punchline. Known for kindness and loyalty, the house was full of students who, like Cedric Diggory, showed quiet excellence. Cedric was not just a good Quidditch captain, he was also an exceptional student. But Hufflepuff had no unique strength academically. Why not let them specialize in the nurturing magics, herbology, magical cooking, healing arts? The greenhouse should have been their territory, a place where their patience and perseverance turned knowledge into practical power. Instead, they learned the same basic transfiguration spells as everyone else, forced to memorize the same wand movements, for turning matchsticks into needles as someone like Draco Malfoy, who sneered through the whole process. Draco, for his part, might have actually benefited from a Slytherin specialization. Imagine a Slytherin curriculum that dove deep into potions, dark arts theory, magical politics, and subversive magic. Professor Snape already favored his house, so why not formalize that preference into a structured path? Slytherins like Blaise Zabini and Pansy Parkinson might have found more purpose if their cunning were channeled into mastering deceptive charms, counterintelligence hexes, or enchanted diplomacy. Instead, they passed time mocking Neville Longbottom, who was quietly suffering through potions with no hope of fair assessment. Neville himself is a tragic example of this flaw. Sorted into Gryffindor, possibly due to a moment of bravery at age 11, Neville spent years struggling in most subjects. Yet, as Professor Sprout noted, he was a prodigy in herbology. If Hufflepuff had been the place where magical agriculture and botanical defense spells were the norm, Neville might have grown into confidence far earlier. But the sorting system was based on an ideal, not a career. So Neville, like others, fought his way through subjects that held no affinity with his talents, in a house that often didn't recognize his worth until his final years. The twins, Fred and George Weasley, were inventors, pranksters, yes, but engineers of enchanted objects and masters of unconventional charms. Their brilliance never had a home at Hogwarts. They built a successful business from spells and potions they taught themselves. Why didn't Hogwarts have a place, perhaps in Ravenclaw, or a new, innovation-oriented house, where magical entrepreneurship was fostered? They were left to break rules and sneak into the room of requirement because there was no place in the official curriculum for unorthodox brilliance. The problem is not that Hogwarts failed to teach students magic. It did. But it failed to take the unique values of the houses and reflect them in a meaningful academic structure. The sorting ceremony makes a promise to the students: you belong here among those who are like you. But then the promise vanishes in a flurry of standardized classes. The houses become more about social division than educational empowerment. What's the point of being a Slytherin if your ambition isn't fed? What good is being a Ravenclaw if your thirst for knowledge is quenched with the same bucket as everyone else's? Even the Triwizard Tournament revealed this shortcoming. Fleur Delacour, educated at Beauxbaton, clearly had a foundation in enchantments and magical aesthetics that set her apart. Victor Krum from Durmstrang displayed defensive and offensive magic with military precision. These schools had unique magical cultures that shaped their students. Yet Hogwarts, with its famous house system, could only respond with a school-wide strategy. Harry, Cedric, Fleur and Krum all competed with individual strengths, but none of them came from any academic specialization within Hogwarts. Cedric's competence felt accidental, not cultivated. Had the house system embraced specialization, perhaps students would have graduated with clear magical paths. A Gryffindor track in combat magic could have included advanced dueling, battlefield transfiguration, and magical ethics. A Ravenclaw course might cover historical spell reconstruction and magical philosophy. A Slytherin path could involve strategic leadership, magical lore, and enchantment for influence. And a Hufflepuff syllabus might center on restorative magic, plant-based spells, and collaborative enchantments. Imagine the possibilities. Classes tailored not only to a student's values, but to their interests. Cooperative projects between houses where differences actually added richness rather than rivalry. A Slytherin could bring strategic insight into a potion project led by Hufflepuff's agricultural mastery. A Ravenclaw could design theoretical frameworks for a Gryffindor-led practical defense trial. These intersections would give the house system actual meaning, value in collaboration, specialization, and identity. The absence of this structure makes the house traits feel superficial. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart, the Sorting Hat sings. But bravery alone doesn't teach you spell work. It doesn't help you understand magical theory or the intricacies of nonverbal charms. In Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind. But what use is a ready mind if all it does is memorize the same lessons as everyone else? The ideals become decorative, used to explain behavior in common rooms and Quidditch matches, but irrelevant in the classroom. In the end, Hogwarts prioritizes unity over diversity. Perhaps that was the founders' final compromise, but it's a compromise that leaves every house a little underfed. What if Helga Hufflepuff had dreamed of a school where nurturing was magic itself? What if Rowena Ravenclaw imagined students building new spells from old manuscripts? What if Salazar Slytherin had built a curriculum around cunning, ambition, and mastery rather than leaving in anger? What if Gryffindor had demanded that bravery be taught not just in theory, but in magical action? These are the what-ifs that haunt the house system. The magic of Hogwarts lies not just in its enchanted ceilings or secret passages, but in its promise to shape young witches and wizards into their best selves. But without academic specialization, the houses remain colored dormitories, symbols without substance. Number 25. Certain houses always win. At the end of Harry Potter's first year, something strange happened in the Great Hall of Hogwarts. The banners were green, the tables were buzzing with triumphant Slytherins, and Professor Snape had a rare glimmer of satisfaction in his cold eyes. For the first time in what felt like ages, Slytherin had won the House Cup. But then Dumbledore stood, twinkling eyes behind half-moon glasses, and awarded last-minute points to Harry and his friends. 10 here, 20 there, for bravery, chess-playing, and standing up to your friends. The hall erupted into chaos, red and gold banners unfurled from the ceiling, and Slytherin's victory vanished like mist. The moment was thrilling, cinematic even, but it exposed a crack in the foundation of Hogwarts' house system, a competition that promised fairness but rarely delivered it. It is important to ask when Slytherin ever truly had a fair shot during Harry's years at Hogwarts. From Harry Potter, and the Philosopher's Stone to Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Slytherin is consistently cast as the antagonist house, with its members often portrayed as bullies or villains. Even when their academic success or Quidditch wins could have justified House Cup points, their achievements are overshadowed by the narrative arc of the good guys in Gryffindor. Year after year, the same pattern repeats. Gryffindor triumphs, often in dramatic fashion, while Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw are treated like background noise, and Slytherin ends up the scapegoat. In Chamber of Secrets, for example, Slytherin nearly wins again. Despite the horror of the basilisk attacks and the terrifying mystery haunting the school, Slytherin continues to dominate in Quidditch and maintain a high academic standard. Yet once again, any chance they have of winning the House Cup is erased by events outside the normal scope of school behavior. Harry defeats the basilisk and destroys the diary, earning accolades not just for himself but for Gryffindor as a whole. There's no mention of whether other houses had contenders for the cup that year. There's barely a mention of Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff at all. Take Cedric Diggory, a Hufflepuff and by all accounts a model student, prefect, seeker, Triwizard champion. He embodied everything Hogwarts should celebrate: integrity, intelligence, courage, and compassion. Yet even in Goblet of Fire, where he dies a tragic hero's death, his house receives no meaningful recognition. The story mourns Cedric, but forgets Hufflepuff. The House Cup is not even discussed. It is as if only Gryffindor's deeds are worthy of reward, and the others merely orbit around their narrative, contributing pieces to a puzzle they'll never be allowed to solve themselves. In Order of the Phoenix, the imbalance becomes even more pronounced. With Umbridge in control and Dumbledore removed from power, the house system becomes a weapon. Gryffindor is actively penalized for rebellion, while Slytherins are rewarded for loyalty to the regime. The House Cup becomes irrelevant, but the system remains broken, corrupted, manipulated. It is no longer about encouraging excellence or camaraderie. It's about reinforcing roles: Gryffindor the rebel, Slytherin the oppressor. The other two houses, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, serve as scenery in this drama, their potential erased by the weight of the script. Even the Quidditch Cup, which seems more objective, is tilted in favour of narrative convenience. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Gryffindor wins after a thrilling match that features Harry's spectacular catch of the snitch. But what about the rest of the season? Did other houses compete with equal fervour? We know Cho Chang, a Ravenclaw, was a talented seeker. We know Hufflepuff had their own victories, but the spotlight always returns to Gryffindor, as if the others never truly mattered. Success outside of Gryffindor's orbit is only acknowledged when it fuels the protagonist's growth. The quote, "You and your little friends think the rules don't apply to you," spoken by Snape, rings truer than intended. The rules of the House Cup are meant to be clear. Points for good behaviour, bravery, intelligence, and performance. Deductions for rule-breaking or poor conduct. But those rules are bent, stretched, or shattered depending on who is under the spotlight. Neville Longbottom earns 10 points for standing up to his friends. That's admirable. But how many students from Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw stood up for truth, for their classmates, or for justice, only to be ignored? Consider Luna Lovegood. She's peculiar, but she's also insightful, wise and courageous. Her efforts in Dumbledore's army, her unwavering support for Harry, and her role in the Battle of Hogwarts are all notable. But her house, Ravenclaw, never benefits. There's no narrative reward, no climactic triumph, no soaring banners in blue and silver. Luna shines, but Ravenclaw fades. Hufflepuff suffers most. Known for loyalty, hard work, and fairness, its virtues are constantly overshadowed by the flashy valour of Gryffindor. The entire school, as filtered through Harry's eyes, seems to regard Hufflepuff as the house for leftovers. Yet in the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore himself says, "You might belong in Hufflepuff where they are just and loyal." It's a noble sentiment, but an empty one if not followed by representation or reward. If Hufflepuff students live by those values every day, why do we never see them holding the house cup? The structure of Hogwarts places students in houses for life. It becomes a second identity, a badge that defines how others treat them. But if that badge comes with systemic bias, what message does that send? Is a Ravenclaw's intellect less valuable than a Gryffindor's recklessness? Is a Hufflepuff's loyalty less heroic than Harry's bravery? If the only house ever allowed to triumph is the one containing the story's heroes, the game is not just rigged, it's meaningless. The last-minute points tradition, especially the one in Philosopher's Stone, undermines the integrity of the system. It teaches students that public heroism is more important than consistent effort. Hermione's cleverness, Ron's chess skills, and Harry's daring are celebrated. But what about the Ravenclaw student who tutored first years all semester? What about the Hufflepuff who volunteered in the infirmary? These are not dramatic acts, but they are the kind that define true character, and yet they are invisible. When the House Cup is used as a plot device rather than a real competition, it loses its meaning. Dumbledore, in rewarding Gryffindor at the 11th hour, creates not inspiration, but resentment. Slytherin students had worked all year, followed rules, won matches, and endured scorn. And in the end, they lost, not because of failure, but because of favoritism. No wonder the divide between houses grows. No wonder animosity festers. This is not to say Gryffindor's victories were unearned. The trio showed bravery time and again. They fought evil, took risks, and defended their friends. But the question is not whether Gryffindor deserved praise. The question is whether others did too and were denied it. Fairness isn't about denying one's heroism, it's about acknowledging everyone else's. At its best, the House Cup could have been a tool for unity, a way to highlight the different strengths of all four houses. It could have shown that courage is not greater than kindness, that intelligence is not lesser than ambition. But the books rarely allow this balance. Instead, they feed into the idea that Gryffindor is right, and the others exist to reflect its glory. Even in the final book, as Hogwarts prepares for war, we see house banners flown, but only Gryffindor's students are described with heroic flair. The others fight too. Zachariah Smith evacuates students, Ernie Macmillan duels Death Eaters, Padma Patil holds the line. But their stories are brief, footnotes to the grand Gryffindor epic. It is a war for the school, and yet only one house truly gets to matter. The House Cup, in theory, could have been a beautiful symbol of shared effort, of diverse strengths working toward a common goal. But in practice, it became a mirror of the book's own narrative priorities. And when you look at it clearly, you begin to realize that for all its tradition, for all its ceremony, the House Cup is not really about who earns it. It's about who the story chooses to remember. Number 26. Sorting ceremony is a public embarrassment. In the echoing Great Hall of Hogwarts, beneath a ceiling enchanted to mimic the sky, trembling first years are led in through towering doors, their eyes darting around the ancient stone walls, their hearts beating like frightened wings. They walk between tables filled with hundreds of older students, all watching, some curious, others barely interested. The sorting hat waits at the front of the room, perched on a stool, its mouth agape, its expression unreadable. This moment is meant to be a rite of passage, but to a scared 11-year-old, it feels more like a trial by fire. They must sit alone beneath that strange hat, while the entire school watches them, judging not only what house they will be placed in, but how long it takes, what the hat says, and how they react. It is not ceremony. It is spectacle. For children like Neville Longbottom, the sorting ceremony is nothing short of a nightmare. When Neville steps forward, he stumbles on the steps and nearly topples the stool. Laughter bubbles across the room. Then the hat debates whether to put him in Gryffindor or Hufflepuff. "Oh, you're difficult," the hat murmurs. "Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. But where to put you? This decision-making process is drawn out, and everyone sees how long Neville sits there, flushed, sweating. He later admits to Harry that the hat almost sent him to Hufflepuff. In the wrong school, such a confession would be forgotten. But at Hogwarts, it marks a child. Older students remember. Labels stick. What purpose does this public display serve? Imagine being that age again. You're small, surrounded by strangers, far from your parents, and forced to parade your deepest qualities before a crowd of peers. For some students, like Hermione Granger, the moment is validating. She's confident, determined, and eager. The hat barely pauses before placing her in Gryffindor. But not every child has that clarity. For others, it's confusion and vulnerability exposed in front of hundreds. When Seamus Finnegan gets sorted, he nervously announces that he's half and half, trying to explain himself before even reaching the stool. The anxiety is raw. Why should that moment be made so visible? Even more telling is the experience of Harry Potter himself. The hat's internal struggle becomes external. It debates placing him in Slytherin. Not Slytherin, eh? It says aloud. Are you sure? You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head. That private fear of being put in the wrong house is laid bare for the entire school to hear. He doesn't realize how many students hear that line until the next day when Draco Malfoy mocks him and rumors begin to swirl. In that one moment, the sorting hat exposes him not only to gossip but also to suspicion. Students begin to question his nature, not just his talent. It haunts him for years. The system doesn't allow space for subtlety or silence. Everything is performed, every hesitation, every pause, every uncertain placement. Consider Peter Pettigrew. He is placed in Gryffindor, though nothing in his behaviour later suggests courage. Would a private sorting have allowed the hat to dig deeper, away from the eyes of the crowd, perhaps seeing what even Peter tried to hide? Or perhaps the hat itself is under pressure, influenced by the audience, choosing spectacle over accuracy. There's an unspoken pressure to provide entertainment, not just classification. The most chilling aspect of the public sorting is its long-term consequences. From that moment onward, the child is branded. A Slytherin might never escape suspicion. A Hufflepuff might be dismissed as unremarkable. A Gryffindor might feel forced to prove bravery, even recklessly. These are burdens placed on children before they've even unpacked their trunks, and it all begins under the gaze of a crowd that remembers who the sorting hat struggled with, who got sorted fast, and who didn't smile at the outcome. Public memory at Hogwarts is long and often unkind. Think of Luna Lovegood, though she was sorted before her time in the story. Known for her oddness, she is placed in Ravenclaw, a house known for intellect and eccentricity. But would a quieter sorting have spared her the constant teasing that followed? From her earliest days, she is marked as Loony Lovegood. Her sorting, her house, her behaviour, all turned into jokes. The sorting ceremony does not shield the vulnerable. It exposes them. It feeds the older students with material for mockery, creating an immediate hierarchy not of seniority, but of perceived identity. And what of the hat's commentary? Why must it speak at all? Why should the whispers it gives be heard by anyone beyond the child? In the books, Harry's conversation with the hat is internal, yet it clearly responds out loud in part. That's how Draco and others find out the hat considered Slytherin. A private process could protect such moments. Imagine if students went one by one into a separate chamber, allowed a quiet moment with the hat without a hall full of eyes. Their reaction could be honest, not forced by expectation. Their fear could be soothed, not observed, and their house placement could remain untainted by peer perception. The hat itself is a relic of an older Hogwarts, a time when spectacle perhaps mattered more than safety. But the world has changed. The magical world has faced Voldemort, betrayal, internal corruption. Is it so unreasonable to question whether the old rituals still serve their purpose? The sorting ceremony as it stands is a ceremony of judgment. It masquerades as tradition but functions more as a pageant. It doesn't test skill or loyalty. It doesn't offer comfort. It merely divides and broadcasts that division before friendships can even form. Even Professor McGonagall, who presides over the sorting, does not intervene when the hat hesitates or when students falter. There is no adult protection from that vulnerability. And while Dumbledore gives his opening speech after the sorting is complete, offering warmth and wisdom, it comes too late for the children who've just endured the most stressful 5 minutes of their young lives. That speech doesn't erase the discomfort. It doesn't undo the laughter some might have endured, or the whispers already forming. The effect is not always immediate. Some students blossom under their house identity, but others shrink. They spend years questioning if the hat was wrong. Hermione is a Gryffindor, but constantly overperforms to prove she deserves it. Ron fears he won't live up to his brothers, and Harry, who begged not to be in Slytherin, becomes obsessed with the idea that the hat saw something in him, something dark. This seed of doubt takes root in first year and doesn't leave him until nearly the end of the series. A private sorting might have lessened that weight. But at Hogwarts, privacy is not tradition. Spectacle is. There's also the danger of creating divisions before the students know each other. A Muggle-born child like Dean Thomas or Justin Finch Fletchley is barely through the doors before being branded as one thing or another. By the time they reach their table, they've already been categorized in the eyes of the school. Could a more private sorting allow those children to form friendships before being labelled? Could houses be revealed gradually, or only among peers in the same year? There are countless ways the process could be gentler, but Hogwarts does not seem to want gentle. And then there's Draco Malfoy. His pride in being a Slytherin is immediate and loud. He sneers before the sorting even begins, clearly confident of where he will go. When the hat confirms his placement without pause, it reinforces everything he believes about bloodlines and superiority. The public nature of the sorting validates his arrogance. It makes him a Slytherin prince admired by some, feared by others. What if the sorting had been private? Would he have acted the same, or would the lack of audience have robbed him of his performance? The public sorting does not just reveal identity, it forces it. Children don't grow into their house values. They are thrown into them, told who they are before they know themselves. They spend 7 years trying to conform or resist. And the entire school watches them start that journey in the most exposed way possible. What if the sorting was not about division, but discovery? What if the hat whispered, the room was quiet, and the child was given a choice, in private, without fear? Instead, the great hall remains silent only at the start. As each name is called, the hall buzzes, claps, sometimes laughs. A tradition that could have been sacred is reduced to a stage. It is no wonder that Harry, years later, remembers his sorting not with pride but with unease. Not because of the decision, but because of the spotlight. Because in that first moment, when a child wants nothing more than to belong, Hogwarts teaches them that who they are is public property, and that lesson once learned is never forgotten. Number 27. Sorting ignores hidden potential. At 11 years old, Harry Potter sat beneath the sorting hat, nervous and uncertain, a boy whose life had been nothing but chaos, neglect, and survival. The hat rummaged through his mind and muttered, "Difficult, very difficult," pausing as if genuinely conflicted. It noted Harry's potential for greatness, his thirst to prove himself, and above all, the qualities that would make him a good Slytherin. And yet, with a simple, internal plea, "Not Slytherin," the hat relented. "Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor," it shouted. In that moment, the sorting hat made a choice that would shape Harry's identity, his friendships, and his path. But what if it had chosen wrong? What if it was only seeing the surface of a boy whose soul had not yet had the chance to unfold? The foundation of the Hogwarts house system is built on the idea that children can be accurately sorted into life-defining categories based on who they are at the age of 11. But 11 is a strange and uncertain age, a time when personality is more potential than proof. A student like Neville Longbottom, shy and insecure on his first day, is placed in Gryffindor, not because of who he is, but because of who he might one day become. At the time, even Neville doubts the choice. "The Sorting Hat made a mistake," he says quietly, as if ashamed of not measuring up. But the hat doesn't see futures, it only sees what is present. And Neville, by all visible measures, was far from the classic Gryffindor mould when he entered Hogwarts. The problem lies in the assumption that greatness can be predicted by an enchanted object reading thoughts in a moment of stress and uncertainty. A child's mind at 11 is a shifting tide of feelings, dreams, and fear. When Hermione Granger was sorted into Gryffindor, it surprised many, including readers. She had every sign of a Ravenclaw, bookish, studious, obsessively curious. Yet the hat saw bravery, or perhaps ambition disguised as the need to prove her intelligence in a world that had underestimated her. And thus the system distorted her path. Hermione would later risk her life, fight in battles, and make bold, terrifying choices. But that courage wasn't forged in childhood. It was born from experience, forged in danger. Had she been placed in Ravenclaw, would she have become less brave? Or would the environment have stifled her emergence as a warrior? Children are not finished people. They are clay, still wet, still being shaped. To assume that a hat, regardless of its magic, can assign a child to their most defining trait is naive at best and damaging at worst. Take the example of Luna Lovegood. Had she arrived at Hogwarts alongside Harry, Ron, and Hermione, her eccentricity and creative mind might have made her a strong Ravenclaw candidate. But Luna's gifts didn't fully bloom until she had space to be herself. Years after, the Sorting Hat might have misunderstood her dreamy nature as mere distraction. The hat might have mistaken her depth for folly. And what about someone like Draco Malfoy? The hat placed him in Slytherin based on lineage, confidence, and ambition. But those traits were inherited, not earned. Draco's journey reveals a boy slowly cracking under pressure, forced into a role he never chose, and terrified of the world he thought he wanted to conquer. There's also the matter of children whose talents are quiet, slow-growing, or easily missed. Susan Bones was sorted into Hufflepuff, the house most often associated with mediocrity, fairness, and loyalty. But Susan lost nearly her entire family to Voldemort's war. Her emotional endurance and quiet strength were not showy, not loud. They were invisible. The Sorting Hat likely felt her grief, but did it recognize it as strength? Did it see the steel behind her silence? And if not, what does that say about how the magical world values certain qualities over others? The hat might proudly state that Hufflepuff takes the rest, but in doing so, it admits its own inability to see nuance. It sorts based on what a child shows, not what they hide. Seamus Finnegan, another Gryffindor, was impulsive, hot-headed, and often reckless. But bravery? True bravery? That came later, when he joined Dumbledore's army and stood against tyranny. At 11, he was a boy fascinated with explosions and mischief, not someone ready to stand in front of Death Eaters. Yet the hat chose Gryffindor. Was that faith or guesswork? Similarly, Ernie Macmillan of Hufflepuff was loyal to the point of stubbornness, but he also possessed a sharp tongue and a deep desire for recognition, traits that could have placed him in Slytherin. But the hat ignored the edges of his personality, focusing on what was easy to label. It's important to remember that the Sorting Hat does not claim to see destiny, it claims to see traits. There's nothing hidden in your head the Sorting Hat can't see, it proudly boasts. But seeing thoughts and emotions is not the same as understanding them. A boy afraid of everything might one day become a hero. A girl obsessed with books might one day fight a war. Thoughts are temporary, character takes time. The hat makes a judgment not on who the child will be, but who they seem to be right now. It's like assigning a job to a child based on what toy they pick up in kindergarten. A boy playing with blocks isn't necessarily an architect. A girl climbing trees isn't destined to be an adventurer. Childhood is performance, not prophecy. The system becomes even more questionable when one considers how strongly the Sorting Hat leans on stereotypes. Slytherins are ambitious, Ravenclaws are smart, Hufflepuffs are kind, Gryffindors are brave. But people are not puzzles with one defining piece. Cedric Diggory was courageous, clever, and just. Was he a Hufflepuff because of his fairness, or in spite of his other strengths? And how many students were placed in houses that suppressed, rather than nurtured, their complex identities? A Ravenclaw who longs to lead, a Slytherin with a gentle heart, a Gryffindor who is deeply insecure. Hogwarts claims to celebrate difference, but its very structure forces simplification. There is no room for growth when you are labelled from day one. If a student is told you are brave, they may never feel allowed to be afraid. If told you are cunning, they may hide their vulnerability. Labels become prisons. The Sorting Hat, by placing children into rigid houses, reinforces the idea that identity is fixed. But nothing about childhood is fixed. Everything is fluid. Take Ginny Weasley, sorted into Gryffindor. She was shy, quiet, and deeply introspective when we first meet her. Her bravery, her confidence, her voice, these came later. Would the Hat have chosen differently if she had walked in crying from homesickness? Even Harry, the supposed poster child for Gryffindor, struggled with his own house. He wondered why he had been considered for Slytherin, questioned whether he truly belonged. "You could be great, you know," the Hat had told him, "but greatness does not wear a single colour. It is not red or green or blue or yellow. Greatness is forged through trials, not traits." The Hat's decision was swayed by a boy's fear of belonging to the wrong group. That's not destiny, that's emotional manipulation. And Hogwarts built an entire educational culture on such fragile moments.